Welcome to the seventh Personal Finance Symposium. My name's Rob Weagley. I'm chair of the Personal Financial Planning Department, and I'm glad to see all of you here, especially the students, even though some of you I know came with a little bit of an arm twisting to get you to come here. But still, I hope you really will benefit from the sessions that we have today. I'll say more about them as the day goes through. Before I do much else, and before I introduce our state treasurer, I'd like to recognize a few of the people that some of them are supposed to be here, and some of them I think are here. Is Jim Dortch here? Jim's not here yet. These are members of our Board of Advisors who came down for the meeting yesterday. Jim Dortch is with Smith Moore and Company. George Fernandez, Waddell and Reed, is not here yet either. Travis Ford is here. Oh, George over here. I'm sorry, George. I didn't see you. Travis Ford's over here from the Wall Street Group down in Jeff City. Travis Hensley, I don't believe, is here. Are you? Okay. Ryan Kinney, Ryan? Over here. Ryan's over here from State Farm, who was supposed to be at the meeting yesterday, but he was missing like 799,000 of his closest friends in Kansas City, so he went there for the parade, knowing full well that that's where I wanted to be too, but so I just wore a blue shirt today. Is that okay? It works. It works. And Dan Shepard, are you here yet? Dan is right here from Capital Investment Management up in Lee Summit offices. So those are our Board of Advisors. Our interim dean back here, Sandy Raccoon, the good-looking guy in the back row. He's been a wonderful interim dean for this year while we're searching for the new dean, and I'm sure he can't wait for that to happen. But it's been wonderful working with him. And the faculty from the Department of Personal Financial Planning, as I see one that's not a faculty member, Veronica Bonaparte back here is our executive assistant. I couldn't do anything without her. Ray Yao is standing right next to her as one of our faculty members as well. Other faculty members that are here, Michael Guillemette, somewhere. Michael Guillemette's over here. Deanna Sharp is in the back row over there. Let's see, who else? Who am I? Is Marco Pantoja here? Is Marco here yet? Marco's not showing up. Marco is running our Office for Financial Success. Andrew Zumwalt. Andrew was working the front desk out there, but Andrew Zumwalt's here. You might have a chance to talk with him. Starla Ivy, and Starla's out there working the desk as well. Those are our faculty, and again, we couldn't do anything that we do without them. To welcome you here, I ask an acquaintance of mine, I will say. I can't call Clint a friend because I don't know him all that well, but at the 45th treasurer of the state of Missouri. Clint was actually here at the first symposium that we did, and we spoke to the group after he was elected treasurer back in, I believe it was 2008 was when he was first elected. He is limited by term limits now to run for re-election, but what Clint does for us, he basically manages and invests a $3.5 billion portfolio. That's what the state of Missouri's portfolio is that he takes care of. Any of you in here that are financial planners would certainly like to get those amount of assets under management without any doubt. And he does not get paid the same as the financial planners do that have that kind of money under management. During the Great Recession that we've just gone through, he actually managed to preserve the AAA rating for our debt as a state, which I think is an incredible accomplishment. At the same time, something we as Missourians ought to be proud of, and people in Kansas ought to be looking to for some leadership to the east of them as far as financial management goes. He's worked hard to bring technology into his office, and one of the things he's done I think has been extremely, he's worked hard at this, is to get a lot of this unclaimed property that exists in the state back to the people. In fact, he's given $242 million worth of unclaimed property back to the citizens of the state of Missouri. And Clint, I will thank you for the $60 that I got out of it. You know, because I said, well, my name's on the list. How about that? I get $60. What a deal. Clint is a big believer in higher education. If you haven't figured it out yet, a lot of this program today has to do with the human side of finance, the human capital side of it, if you will. He manages Missouri's MOST program, which is our 529 plan, which has $2.2 billion itself within that plan, which is not money that he manages, but that other investment companies manage for us. 150,000 accounts that are in it. And in 2012, Missouri created the MOST 529 matching grant program. And I want to mention that only because of the fact it has set the foundation for a public-private partnership to provide resources to at-risk children to save for their college education, which I think is going to resonate well with Willie's presentation later. I'm sorry, I called you Willie, but that's okay, with Willie's presentation later. Clint was the first member of his family to attend university. And again, I think that that resonates extremely loud to me as a faculty member at a land-grant university. That is why many of us work in the public sector as opposed to the private sector. He received his Bachelor of Arts and his master's degree from the University of Missouri in St. Louis. And he, like many, many other politicians in Jeff City, they choose to live in Columbia instead. He's a resident of Columbia. Clint, welcome to the podium.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good. So, for full disclosure, I'm not paid 1% on a $3.6 billion. And you know, Rob mentioned pulling some strings to get folks here this morning, and Rob told me that the Royals were going to be here to greet us. But it is great to be here, and just a pleasure to be able to be back on the campus today and spend some time. As Rob said, I think I spoke at the first one of these many years ago, and I'm just really excited about the growth of the program and the work that's being done here. You know, first of all, I come to you with a profound interest in financial literacy. I think that, you know, when I was a legislator, I worked on the education requirement. Missouri is one of only a few states in the nation that actually has a financial literacy requirement to graduate from high school. It's a half-credit requirement that we worked on when I was in the House. I'm actually in conversations now with the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis to do a look back at the last few years of that credit, both from a teacher perspective but from a curriculum perspective, to see if it's really meeting our obligations and our responsibilities to students and to families around the state. And you know, it's my view, and I think the Federal Reserve's view, that there's a lot of room to grow there and make that credit much more dynamic, make it much more effective, and I suspect some of you in this room might have some thoughts on that. The second piece that Rob talked a little bit about, and that Dr. Elliott's going to talk a lot about, is I've worked a great deal on community development accounts, CDA accounts, using basically our MOST plan kind of as an infrastructure to help build assets for families that are in vulnerable situations and at-risk children. So, you know, both of those pieces, as I've worked on them, it always strikes me that when we help someone become financially literate, and I'm not even sure that I like that word, but when we help them grow their sort of educational abilities in terms of the world of finance, we empower them in all sorts of other ways beyond just money. So the impact that we make, the impact that you can make in this is huge. So I want to talk about a couple things today. The first really is, I think, the reality of the important role that many of you play who are current professionals in this space, but also those that aspire to be, in really an unbelievably quickly changing landscape in terms of retirement and money management in this country. I mean, we've undergone a wholesale change in how we do this in a very quick period, and you're really front and center to that and helping us cope with that. And the second piece is to talk a little bit about some of the asset building and some of the lessons we've learned from our 529 plan, which I think have direct implications for the work that the advisors in this room are doing on a day-to-day basis to help families. So you know, I come to you as someone, Rob said, who manages $3.6 billion. You know, we manage our 529 plan. So I have a great deal of respect for those that understand what it takes to build those relationships, to build that trust. And it really is an unbelievably special honor. And I can tell you, I walk into the office every day with the same sense of excitement that I did when I was elected, that someone has trusted me with that huge responsibility. And I don't think that's unlike the career that you're talking about entering into, or for those of you that are currently in it, which is, you know, families have given you just a huge, huge responsibility. And I have really a great deal of respect for that. And I think it's an exciting time for the industry because of the challenges that we face. I think from a big picture perspective, it is much clearer at this point, and there's a much better understanding of where the value is in the investment process, that professional counsel, that independence, that trust, that human interaction actually really matters in this process, and that the work that any of you do in this room is bigger than some algorithm or some calculator, that human interaction component is really vitally important to actually really meet your clients' expectations. For the industry veterans that are here, I think there's a huge opportunity, but I would also say responsibility, to mentor that next generation of advisors, to help build them up, to build their capabilities up so you can help shape this industry. For those that are aspiring to be financial advisors, the good news is I think this is a great career choice. About half of all financial advisors are over 55 years old. At some point, everyone does retire, even a financial advisor. And ultimately, you have a great shot at being able to really shape this industry and really create what it should look like in the next 30 years in terms of serving individuals and serving families. So there's a lot of excitement, I think, around this space. And during the last 30 years, we've seen an absolutely monumental shift in retirement planning, in money management. I mean, absolutely huge shift. And I know that many of you know this data, but I think it's important to capture. When Congress passed in 1974 the act that allowed for individual retirement accounts, later on in 1978 they passed the act that allowed for 401k plans. You know, these plans originally, at least by those that passed them, were seen as a bolt-on. They were seen as sort of a supplement or an add-on to this existing retirement system. Never at that point were they really intended on being a foundation of a retirement income stream, these accounts. They were really simply add-ons and bolt-ons. So we went from a system pretty quickly that was pretty paternalistic to one that was solely based on the individual. And if you think about that old system for a moment, you know, we had a system that you didn't have to worry about or think about your account balances. You didn't have to worry about savings rates or drawdown strategies. You didn't have to worry about asset allocation or cost or fees. Everyone was sort of just taking care of this for you in this old system, right? And then to a new system where individuals are empowered to make these decisions, but on the other hand, every bit of the risk in your retirement is placed onto that one person, onto that individual. And you've seen that shift as we've gone from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans over the last few years. I think 1979, 62% of all workers that had some sort of a workplace retirement plan were in a defined benefit plan. That number today, in 2011 at least, was around 7%. That number now is approaching 5%. Think about that shift. So we had a shift just in 1980 where essentially 62% of those folks didn't really think a lot about how they were going to plan for retirement because that was being taken care of for them to a large extent, to a system now where about 5% of all individuals have that. In 1979, about 16% of all workers that had a workplace retirement plan had a defined contribution plan. Now that number is 70%. So we had this huge monumental shift that really didn't happen really with the retiree in mind at that point, right? It really happened because we wanted to reduce risk on corporate balance sheets. So because we didn't have the retiree in mind, we had a rocky start to this. I mean, you think about plan design for 401k plans originally when they started, they were terrible, many of them. In fact, we still have a lot of plans today that aren't well-designed plans. We didn't understand a lot about investor psychology. We didn't understand a lot about behavioral economics. Investments in these plans were often too numerous, too costly, sometimes inappropriate for the investor. So in so many ways, we're still being tested, those of us in this room right now, on how do we achieve what retirement should look like for Americans. You know, we had a few golden years there where people didn't think about this quite as much, but we're entering into a new place now. Many are still, about half of all workers lack a workplace retirement plan. Income replacement rates for Social Security, even without any changes, income replacement rates are going to continue to go down, meaning we're going to have less Social Security income to help replace that income going forward that we had as we're active workers. And well over half of all households are in a position where they're at risk of really losing their standard of living as they enter into retirement. And I'm talking about a significant drop, so we're talking about a 15% or larger drop for those workers. So my thesis today is really that this shift, these challenges we face, these opportunities, really make all of you in this room more important than ever. You have a chance to really bring the best of what finance has to offer. Independent counsel that does more than provide simply access to a mutual fund or a stock ticker, that you can really be a comprehensive partner with families to really help them achieve their goals, to really play a part in many parts in their life in terms of really achieving their goals, more than managing money, but really focusing on the big picture for them. That data as a backdrop, I think, really tells us a story of why you're so important to this, but really you're part of something much bigger here, which I think is an exciting time to be coming into this space, that you're part of a bigger change in how we approach retirement and part of a bigger challenge. I also saw the other piece I want to talk about was the asset building piece, and I know Dr. Elliott is here, and He has done great work in this space. Washington University has done great work in this space. And a lot of this amazing research that has been done in this space has really guided the work that I've done with MOST, our 529 plan. And the key part of this research, the key part of this is that the value of these MOST accounts is more than monetary. So it's not simply whether this MOST account has $50 or $500 or $5,000, but there's something intrinsic and powerful when you have that savings account and you're a child and you're a parent and you begin to focus on those goals. So when I came into office, I built our 529 plan with some of the same values that you would share in this room: low cost, accessible, good investment options that don't overwhelm. We can become a MOST investor at $25. Other states have minimums of $3,000. So really a plan that can serve all Missourians and do it at a low cost. But 2 years into this responsibility, I still woke up to a really harsh reality. The average account holder for a 529 plan, average family income, is about $142,000. The average non-account holder is about $42,000. So we looked at that data and saw that we were missing a huge group of potential investors that have a chance to be able to save for college and prepare. Frankly, individuals like my parents and my grandparents that would have fallen into that group. So in 2012, I started a small matching grant program. It was really a pilot program, small to start, $500,000. It served families who make under $70,000 income a year. We'd match up to $500 on a first-come, first-served basis. And the basic idea was to help out a few of these families, but also spur some growth and interest in really starting 529 accounts. And the results came in, and they were okay, but really at that point, just okay. But then something started to happen that was really special, and we started getting phone calls. And the first was from an organization called Beyond Housing, which works in Normandy School District. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Normandy School District has been a school district that has been under immense struggle now for really a couple decades, but has come into a clear focus over the last few years. This individual donor, this anonymous donor, wanted to contribute $500 to every account for every kindergartner that started school in Normandy School District. Kind of a basic idea, but really overwhelming and a continuing program that didn't end. And then we received another phone call from Wells Fargo, and another phone call after that from some schools that the Danforth family runs, and then another from Maxine and Bob Clark with Build-A-Bear. And before long, we were serving literally thousands of individual children at risk, all with private money, all grassroots developed in these accounts. And they're all different. Some of them have performance standards in place for parents and for kids. Some of them are just simply an entitlement. When you walk in that door as a kindergartner, you get that money. But all share a really important value, and one of them is that early investment in children is the best investment that we can ever make in this state, in this country. And the second, again, goes back to the idea that the value of these accounts is more than monetary, and that there's some intrinsic value in the power of these accounts. And the research that Dr. Elliott and others have told us is pretty clear, that the mere presence of these 529 accounts can really transform lives and make success later in life more likely. And I can tell you, I see that when I walk into classrooms, and I've walked into hundreds of classrooms around the state, where I come in to talk simply about saving for college with parents and with kids, and very quickly, that conversation shifts to what they want to do when they grow up, and also what parents have in mind to do for them when they want to do when they grow up. And we get some wonderful career options, right? Entertainment lawyers, baseball players, especially right now in Missouri, on the western side of the state at least. We get professors, teachers, engineers, carpenters, you name it. I even had one young man at Roundtree Elementary in Springfield. He came up to me in a suit and tie, and he said, "I want to be a lobbyist." So it's once in a while a politician is left without any words to say, and that was the case. But the reality is that conversation shifts very quickly into these dreams. And that account transforms from just simply a material asset to help pay for college to a focal point for parents, for kids, for educators to really achieve these dreams and to help these kids believe that high expectations really matter. And if you set expectations high early on, that's a very powerful idea. So that is something that we've seen firsthand, that these accounts have that value. And I think about the work that you do as a financial advisor, and it reminds me that I think for some of these families, they face that same idea. You're giving them and empowering them in ways that are more than just monetary in nature. So a couple final thoughts before I leave you. I mean, first of all, I think for those of you in this room that are professionals and those that you are aspiring to do this as a career, you really have something to offer in a public policy discussion in this country about planning for retirement and about what retirement security really looks like. The public policy piece of this is important. I didn't talk about it a lot today, but we have some serious issues as a country to deal with in terms of Social Security solvency, what types of incentives really help people save, how do we take the latest techniques from behavioral economics and really make them part and parcel to the daily lives of Americans. And the second piece of this really is a challenge to each of you as you work in this space, which is that more than managing money, again, you're giving access to an investment, you're empowering people. When you manage their money safely and securely, when you help them achieve your goals, you're empowering individuals of all stripes to be able to make decisions. And in that, there's an opportunity, I think, for each of us to reach a little bit higher and do a little bit more. And one thing that I would offer is that each of you in your practices on a day-to-day basis carve out some piece to serve families that you otherwise wouldn't serve. I think there's a tremendous amount of power in that, because when you make that investment and serve those families that may not qualify under the traditional arrangements of the families that you serve in terms of their asset level, you're not just educating that one generation, you're imparting financial knowledge and empowering them to be able to pass that on to the next generation too. And I think that's a very powerful idea, and I think that's one we see in the work that Dr. Elliott's doing with the 529 accounts and college and community development accounts. But that's one that we can also have as part of our day-to-day lives too. So thank you for being here. It's great to spend time with you this morning, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Does anybody have any questions for him? Well, we've got a few minutes before 9 o'clock. He says he's willing to take a question or two. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of change do you see in terms of the number of families that were now being served after you got the private donation?
So I think the story is still being told, right? So we're in the midst of this change, and it doesn't happen in a 2-year period or even a 4-year period. It happens over time. But the 1,000 families that we're currently serving are families that would have never, ever been touched by the MOST plan. These are families who really are all at poverty level or below. So these are very vulnerable families that would have never, ever been touched by the program. The growth in the program that we're seeing, we have another 4 or 5 of these in the works, both in Kansas City and in St. Louis. We think we'll probably double the size of this program over the next few years. And there's going to be, additional growth. And some of that will begin to touch middle-class families that otherwise wouldn't save, and some of it will be in the more vulnerable family space.
Where could you go to learn more about the 529 accounts?
Where can anyone go? Yeah, so most visit www.most.org. Yeah. It's a great plan, by the way.
Any more questions?
Thanks for coming out today. You mentioned financial literacy as well. You mentioned the program in the schools, the half credit. What other initiatives do you have as far as financial literacy in the state for young people, as well as the elderly, issues there as well and overall?
Yeah. So a few pieces of this. First of all, I'll give credit to our Secretary of State that does good work working with fraud issues with the elderly, and they spend a lot of time in that space in terms of doing education. We really work, my focus is more, I would describe as early stage, so we want to focus on young people, in addition, the financial literacy requirement that we implement. We think there's a couple challenges with that requirement and how it's been implemented over time that we can make it better. One is better teacher training and preparation for teaching that requirement is a big piece. And one is bringing some new curriculum into that space that takes advantage of what we've learned about behavioral finance over the last 10 years. So that's an important space. We try to build an infrastructure around banking also. We had a program in the state to help educate individuals and state workers on the benefits of having access to a traditional bank and why that's important to be part and parcel to our financial system. So, I think that we often talk a lot about financial literacy, but in terms of tangible activity, not enough is really done. So what we've tried to do is focus on what I would describe as tangible to-dos. More access to banks for individuals that otherwise wouldn't have access, help people save, teaching them the basics of why saving matters, those sorts of things.
Clint, thanks for taking the time to be here today. With respect to the budget deal in Washington, what is your interpretation of the impact on the Social Security Trust? There's been some conversation about that, and how does that play out?
Yeah. So the budget deal, first of all, it's important, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you have to be responsible, and raising the debt ceiling is a critical piece of that, right? You cannot go into this and not fulfill your obligations. So I think, taking that argument off the table, I think is important. And I credit the speaker for doing that before he left, because I think it was an important thing to do to provide some stability. We've butted up against this close in the past. So the changes in Social Security look like to be pretty minimal at this point. As you might know, there was a file and suspend strategy for Social Security that actually not many, but some individuals have been using since around 2008. That's been eliminated in the budget deal. The Social Security question, I think, is much bigger than one budget deal. I think it involves a few points. One is, ultimately, long-term, there's going to have to be some payroll tax increases to fund and stabilize Social Security. That's not the only way to do it, and that's not the way it should be stabilized 100%, but at least part of this should be done through additional payroll taxes long-term. The other piece is Social Security is still doing something I think they're making a huge mistake on, the administration. They're telling people that retirement age, your full retirement age is at 65, 66, 67, whatever numbers. Well, since 2008, the full retirement age really is 70. I mean, that's the point where we really hit our peak benefit level. I think it's important to keep people working who have the ability to work physically. I think there's another question for workers that are sort of physically working, and we're going to have to develop some alternatives for them. But to work longer. I think working longer is going to be a big piece of stabilizing Social Security long term. I think working longer, small increases in payroll tax, those sorts of changes combined can stabilize the program going forward. But it's going to be critical. I think Social Security is way more important to stabilize now than it was 30 years ago in terms of what it's the only annuitized stream of income that most families are going to have in retirement at this point.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Clint. Quick question on Missouri Most. How often do you guys go back to the manager? So like Vanguard's managing it now, right? With the deduction changing that Missouri resident can, go to any 529 plan. How often do you look at that? I know New York uses Vanguard. It's cheaper than Missouri. So how often do you guys get to go back and negotiate?
So we signed a 5-year contract 5 years ago. We're in the middle of doing an RFP right now. So that's exciting. It gives us a chance to focus on cost and lower those costs. Missouri, as you mentioned, is a tax parity state, meaning an investor in Missouri can invest in any plan in the United States and still get that tax break. For me, previous treasurers have fought that because they feel like it hurts the plan. I think the reality is it just forces us to compete as well as we can and have a high-quality plan that provides some value. So there's going to be no doubt there's plans that are going to have higher asset levels that are going to be cheaper. But we were about the 5th cheapest plan in the United States during the last negotiations. We're still in the top 10 in terms of cost structure. So maintaining a good cost structure while providing some unique choices, I think, is going to be my goal in the RFP.